This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call Keir. Put your questions to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Yes, it is 2 minutes after 9 on Friday the 7th of July. Call Keir with the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, who's in the studio opposite me. Just before we get into the first question, Tony, you will have the first question. Sir Keir, you've had your own Johnny Bairstow moment yesterday down in Gillingham in Kent, where you were trying to make a speech and some protesters wanted to have this. Can I get a quick reflection on that from you? Good morning to you.
Yeah, well, there am I, sort of delivering my speech, thinking I've got the audience captivated, and I hear two protesters behind me start shouting about the environment, who'd obviously missed the fact that the last speech I did on missions was all about the environment. But then...
You didn't bundle them off, though, like Bairstow?
I didn't pick them up and carry them off. I actually spoke to them and then they were escorted off.
OK, did you subsequently have a conversation with them, or were you unable to?
No, I didn't, because I was going straight into other things. But, yeah, it's one... these things, as a politician, happen from time to time. You're going to get this.
Of course you are. All right.
And, you know, it was peaceful and we dealt with it and that was fine.
Let's get to the questions. We might get on the environment later, but I doubt if you'll be surprised by the first question coming your way, Sir Keir. It's from Tony in Tunbridge Wells. Tony, you want to raise the conversation we had at the start of the show. You're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Tony.
Yeah, morning, Sir Keir. As a natural Labour voter, someone who's voted Labour all my life, have you got any idea of how much damage this is doing to your party? How much damage Sadiq Khan is doing? I cannot wait for the next election.
This is over ULEZ. Why is ULEZ so damaging to you, Tony?
It's decimating people's lives. You know, people to be charged £75 a week to go to work, even though if you're only driving 20 minutes. The man is killing London. You need to really get on top of this, Sir Keir, because he is going to cost you the next election. I will never, ever vote Labour again. This is generation. This will take me 10 years to vote for you again. For this to even been thought of by a Labour mayor to do this to working people in London, it's abhorrent.
Well, let's just explain what it is. ULEZ will, under the plans of the rollout next month, an additional £12.50 to used cars inside the London area. Also, even if you just move your car within the London area, it's been brought into highlight now because one of the candidates from Sir Keir's team, Danny Beales in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, has said he would to put his community first and would be opposing the rollout of the expansion of the scheme. Sir Keir.
Tony, let me start by recognising just how difficult it is for you and others. I do absolutely get that. This is a lot of money and it comes in the middle of a cost of living crisis when every other bill is going up at the same time. I absolutely understand that. I think it is important, Tony, just to make clear that there's a legal obligation on the mayor to take measures in relation to air pollution. So he doesn't just have a free choice to decide what he does here. He's got to take action. The first ULEZ, actually, the very first one, was introduced by a Tory mayor. But he's got to take action because the law says he's got to take action. I think the question then, Tony, that I would say is, how can we help you on the money side? And that's where I think there is a scrappage scheme in place where people get assistance to scrap and change their vehicle. It's only £2,000. And, you know, the government, Tony, has given money to Portsmouth, to Bristol and to Birmingham to help because we know it impacts on people. They haven't given a penny to London and therefore the mayor is asking the government to stump up some more money so that people like you aren't footing the bill. I know, Tony, that still hurts in a sense in your pocket, you know, week after week after week.
Is Danny Beales right to oppose it?
Look, Danny is right to stick up for what he hopes will be his constituents. Obviously, there's a by-election there in 2 weeks.
So do you support the rollout on August the 29th?
Look, I accept that the mayor has no choice but to go ahead because of the legal obligation on him. I think Danny's right to stick up for his constituents. And
so you do support the rollout on August 29th?
I understand the pain it's going to inflict.
No, sorry, the question was, do you support the rollout?
I don't think there's an alternative, Nick. I have looked at, as you'd imagine, I've looked at the legal provision because, you know, if there was wriggle room, then, you know, but in the end...
He's not alone, Sir Keir. Siobhan McDonough, your MP in Mitcham and Morden, John Cross, your MP in Dagenham and Rainham, Clive Efford, your MP in Eltham. I'm sure people you know well, they're all saying delay, not saying don't do it, just saying delay, Sir Keir.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think my experience of the mayor is that he always listens to these overtures, and that's why he's asked for more money on scrappage. I've looked at it myself, looked at the legal provision. I think it is difficult to simply say you can ignore the legal requirement to do something about this. So the mayor, in fairness, is between a rock and a hard place on
Quick
this.
response from Tony. It's a reluctant support. I think I can characterise it from Sir Keir. It's a reluctant support. Tony,
Yeah, I do get it, Tony. I'm not for a minute. I do absolutely understand.
Then you'll reap what you sow, then, Sir Keir, because you will not get elected. I don't believe this rubbish about the pollution levels in London. Have you seen the videos from Brown Car Guy?
No, I haven't, Tony.
Where he's by the North Circular and taking all the readings. You go on the tube.
Just to interject briefly, but I will give you one fact. I mean, we have to accept that there's a young woman in Catford, South East London, who lost her life due to air quality.
Please don't give me that, Nick. He has weaponised that poor girl's death. He's weaponised it. He's jumped on this. It's a money-making scheme. That man needs to be arrested. He needs to be arrested.
All right, okay. Money making, certainly it's looking like it'll make somewhere in the region of £25 million a month. To the idea that the science is not yet proven, or that there is doubt over whether this will have just on that, if we will, Sir Keir, and then I will move on.
Look, there is air pollution problems in London. There's no doubt about it. In my constituency, I know for a fact that there are high numbers of people with air pollution problems. And that's why, the law recognises that and then says, well, you've got to do something to reduce air pollution, and therefore you can't. The mayor can't sit back and say, well, I'm not going to do it.
And lastly, Tony, thank you for calling. When you said you've lost a vote, how does that strike you?
Look, I'm of course worried about that, and I'm also not just a vote. Tony's in a difficult position, and many other people will be in that position because it's really tough. Which is why I would use this opportunity, Nick, to call on the government to make more money available in London for people like Tony, so that the scrappage scheme is a better scheme. He can change his car and do something about it.
You could call on a Labour mayor to delay it while you lobbied the government, or indeed you got into power.
Yeah, look, Nick.
Would you make more money available? Were you in power?
Yes, we would make more money available because I think.
Why not ask him to delay?
Well, Nick, because the law is in place already, and therefore, if he has
to do it by August 29.
If he doesn't do this, legal action will be taken against him. If he does do it, legal action will be taken against him. Right. It is rocket. In other words, it's nice and easy. I heard Robert Halfon on, I think, earlier on with you saying, it's just effectively a choice of the mayor. That isn't a fair, accurate situation here. It is, if the law says you've got to take some measures to reduce air pollution, you can't simply say, well, I'm going to ignore that because everything else would fall apart if you did that.
Let's go to Tony. Good luck, sir. Thank you for your call. Paul is in Leicester. Paul, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hi, Paul.
Morning. Given the shambolic excuse we have had for Parliament, that's all persuasion since 2019, and the only functioning things we seem to have had is our public inquiries, do you agree with me that the only conversation you should have had with Sue Gray was like a scenario in your tea room or something in passing, saying rhetorically, if things had been different, Sue, I would have loved you to have worked for me?
Paul.
This is after we have an investigation carried out. Cabinet Officer Minister Jeremy Quinn said the rules and guidance that govern the conduct of civil servants are clear and transparent. They're calling into question the hiring of Sue Gray as one of the key member of your team, Sir Keir.
Paul, the scenario you put to me is almost exactly what happened. Now, Nick was frustrated with me last time I came on the programme because he said, what conversations did you have with Sue Gray? And I said, I'm going to have to wait for the committee because that's where we've put the evidence and they want us to wait until they've made a ruling.
Well, I also asked when. When did you have your first conversation?
So now, Nick, I can give you and Paul the full readout.
Is it unexpurgated?
It is. It was a short call. It was towards the end of October, Paul, and I phoned Sue. I've known Sue for a number of years. She's a phenomenal woman. I was looking for a chief of staff, and the conversation I had with her, which was a short conversation, which is, I'm looking for a chief of staff. If you were to leave the civil service, is this something that you might consider? Because I knew the rules, she knew the rules, and we left it at that. And then, Paul, I didn't speak to her again. That was the extent of it. The only caveat is when the leak came and she decided she would stand down. Just before she stood down, I gave her a call to make sure she was all right and to find out what she was doing. But that, Paul, is the long and the short of it. And that's why I've always been confident in saying there was no breach of the code. I didn't discuss politics. I didn't discuss policy. I simply said, if you are to stand down at some point, would you be interested by being my chief of staff?
And just to clarify, that was in October.
That was in October,
months after the Partygate report was published.
Oh, yeah, months. I didn't speak to Sue Gray. The last time I saw Sue Gray before that was at a funeral some years beforehand. So I had no conversation with her then. I was simply making an inquiry, as happens all the time, which is, if you're to leave the job you're in, would you be interested in working for me? And we left it at that.
Why didn't you tell me that in March, Sir Keir?
Well, Nick, I was frustrated. The committee had asked Sue and me not that they should be the people who have this information first, and they should be the people to consider it in the proper way. Now, that was frustrating for me because it's actually a very short story. I know what the rules are. Sue knows what the rules are. That's why we only had a brief conversation along those lines. If I wish the committee hadn't said, don't tell anyone until we've determined. But they've got their own process, which we respected. And, of course, they've said nothing was wrong.
OK, thank you for that, Paul. Thank you for your call. Rob's in Maidstone. Rob, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hi, Rob.
Good morning. Good morning, Sir Keir. So over the last 10 years, I've been battling my mental health, and I've been hospitalised, homeless, been on food banks. So
Rob, I'm sorry to hear that.
NHS. Yeah, but I've been depending on the NHS. So you can imagine my horror when I see that Tony Blair agrees with Sajid Javid about bringing in some form of pay for access. Has the Labour Party given up on universal care based on need?
Well, just to clarify, Sajid Javid has called for a royal commission. He is, of course, a very recent health secretary. This is to mark the 75th birthday of the NHS. Tony Blair separately has talked about looking at the idea of those who are in a fortunate position almost making what's called a co-payment, which is a part payment to be in receipt of NHS care. Just to clarify where we stand, Sir Keir.
Rob, the answer is no. I feel very strongly about this. Nick knows this. My wife works for the NHS. My mum was a nurse. My sister was a nurse. My mother-in-law was a doctor. So the NHS goes very deep in our family. The principle, Rob, that it's free at the point of use at need and it's paid for by general taxation, those two principles are sacrosanct for me. They are the founding principles of the NHS. And all of the work we've done on making sure the NHS is fit for the future is premised on those principles. Now, Rob, the only exception to that is that with the current waiting lists, we would agree that to get the waiting list down, we should make some use of the private sector just to help get those waiting lists down. But, Rob, there's no intention on my part to move away from those principles. And I hope that comes as some comfort to you.
So I'll come back to you in just one second, Rob. So what would you say to Sir Tony? He said, and I quote, brave political leadership is needed to prevent decline in the NHS.
Yeah, I think...
What would you say to... He's wrong, then? No,
he's not wrong about that. I think what Tony said has been characterised in a way that he didn't really mean. But look, it does take brave leadership, and there will be brave leadership. I've set out the 5 big things that I want an incoming Labour government to achieve if we're privileged enough to come into power, and one of them, a central one, is reforming the NHS. That does mean change, and I know that's difficult for the NHS because they feel that change is being imposed on them all the time. But we've got to go to preventative measures. We've got to go into our communities. We've got to use AI, technology. All of that change needs to take place. That will take courage as we move towards it. So the first job is get the NHS back up. It's on its face at the moment under this government. Get it on its feet, but then not just on its feet. I don't have an ambition for the next Labour government simply to manage the mess a bit better than this lot. I want us to move forward with a better NHS. So, Rob, that includes better mental health provision. I feel passionately the mental health provision should be in the community and that the waiting time for mental health access should be much, much reduced. I would like it to be months, not the sort of many, many months that it is now, Rob. I'd also like mental health support in our schools, in our communities. So, Rob, I feel very passionately about this. And those 2 governing principles, paid for by taxation and free at the point of use, they guide me in what an incoming Labour government would do.
Quick response from you, Rob, from what you've heard from Sir Keir.
Well, Sir Keir, I will tell you that listening to you and to Wes Streeting, I actually bit the bullet and I joined the party this month because I do believe that you have the best interest of the NHS at heart. I just hope that mental health services will get the attention it deserves so that people aren't waiting years to get help that could stop them being a burden on the state in the future.
Rob, thank you for joining the party, and I'm determined that we will follow through on that. Thank you.
Go to other calls. Sidar is in King's Cross. Go ahead, Sidar. Good morning to you.
Hi, Sidar.
Good morning.
Hello,
Good
sir.
morning. Thank you. My question for Mr. Starmer is, does he agree that the government Rwanda policy is illegal, immoral, unworkable, and atrociously expensive? And if Labour comes to power, they will end the Rwanda policy?
Well, it hasn't even begun. The only people who've been to Rwanda so far are King Charles and Boris Johnson. Unfortunately, they're both, well, in one case, they came back. Sakir?
Yeah, look, Sidar, I think you must be a constituent, by the way, if you're in King's Cross. But look, on Rwanda, it's the wrong scheme. It is unlawful. We just had that declared by the courts the other day, and it's massively expensive. I think the figure I saw last week was £169,000 for any person who might be removed, and of course no one has been removed. Millions of pounds, over £100 million have gone into a scheme which is unworkable, wrong, has been declared unlawful. Meanwhile, the government hasn't tackled the criminal gangs that are driving this vile trade. Meanwhile, more people than ever are coming across the channel. I don't want to see that. We need to stop.
So we
these
know what
boats.
the wrong policy is, Sakir. So what is the right policy, sir?
The two things I do straight away is upstream work on the criminal gangs, across border, getting it near a source, because if we simply wait until people have arrived in northern France, that is the most difficult time to actually stop them making that dangerous journey. So you've got to work upstream. The other thing, Nick, we have got to process the claims. You know, of all the people who arrived by small boats in the last year, 1% have had their claims processed. I came on your programme, I think about 6 months ago, and said it was 4%. So since our Prime Minister has said he's going to get to grips with Stop the Boats, it's gone from 4%, which was appalling, down to 1%. If you don't process these claims, you will never eradicate this problem.
Thanks for that, Sidar. Let's go to some of the questions that are coming through on the text, tweets and emails. This comes through from William. I am a teacher. I am on strike today. Does Sakir agree with the 6.5% pay rise for teachers that's been put forward by the government? I don't think it's the government, actually. I think it's an independent pay review body, as I understand. Do you support the recommendation, 6.5%?
Look, I support this being resolved.
Sorry. Do you support 6.5%?
Well, firstly, we haven't seen the recommendation yet because the government hasn't published it. You challenged Robert Halfon, I think, on this about an hour or so ago, and he said it'll be published in due course. Well, in due course. I mean, my daughter is at home today because her school's on strike, just as she was on Wednesday, and nobody wants to see that. And for the government to say, oh, we'll do it in due course, publish it, let us all see it, and then, most importantly, get around the table and resolve this. Now, I'm not going to commit on air to a percentage when I haven't seen the recommendation, but I do know that...
Why can't you do that, Sakir?
Because all of these issues are always resolved by negotiation around the table. And Nick, the government hasn't been in the same room negotiating with the union for weeks. I think, and I'll be correct if I'm wrong, since about May. They haven't even been in the room. So whatever figure you pick is secondary to the fact that you've got to be around the table. And Bridget Phillipson is the Shadow Secretary of State for Education. If we were in government, I would require her to be in the room every day until we got this resolved. We cannot allow education to be disrupted like this.
So you would honour it if you were in government?
Well, I'd look at it and...
So can you say whether you would honour it? I mean, you'd look at it as...
Nick, what I'm not going to do is to say what in a year or two an incoming Labour government might do, a particular percentage. What I do say is these things are always resolved by negotiation, and that's what we would do.
All right, staying with teachers, Kat, who's a teacher in Liverpool, said they heard Andrew Lloyd Webber, speak on the show last week. He's doing amazing work with MIST, which is music in secondary schools. How seriously would Labour take investment in music education? In case you didn't hear it, briefly, can we just play a little of what Andrew Lloyd Webber told us last week?
What it does is it really, really helps them as people. It's a fantastic way to learn, say, maths. It improves your self-awareness. If you're playing in an orchestra, you become a team player. And we have all of the statistics that shows that not only have some of the people gone on, or some of the children, to become musicians, but the majority of the kids have really, really, really changed their behaviour.
Are you aware of MIST, Music in Secondary Schools Trust, and the work it's done?
I am, and I'm 100% in agreement.
It's £200 a year per instrument per child, and in many cases that's the first real item of value they've ever earned. They earn team discipline if they're in an orchestra. It can even take them away from a life of crime. Sakir.
Yeah, I agree. And I studied music at school. I went to the Guildhall School of Music, actually, as a junior scholar when I was younger.
Music's loss was politics' gain.
I don't know about that. I wasn't very good at music.
Well, some might say.
But thank you, Nick.
Go ahead.
But look, I do agree. And yesterday I did a speech on education and on opportunity, and this was all about making sure that children and young people, their future isn't determined by their start in life. And one of the things I want to change is the curriculum. At the moment, creative arts, music, media, they're not counted, as it were, when schools are judged. If we will change that and make sure that creative arts, music are one of the measures that are judged, that will make a massive difference, because then schools, I think, will massively invest in it.
And you would work with Lloyd Webber on this?
Absolutely. And what he says is so important, which is those skills of communication, of being able to catch someone's eye, come in at the right time if you're playing music, work as a team. These are skills not just for learning, but actually for life. Many businesses say to me, we can actually teach the technical skills we need in our sector, in our business, but what we can't teach and we need are those skills of working in a group, expressing yourselves. One of the things I said yesterday is we also want oracy. It's a word that's people aren't familiar with, but it's basically being confident speaking, which holds many, many children back, particularly working class children. We want that to be a sort of given a much higher priority. So I feel passionately, because in 2023, when I was going through the statistics, to learn that still, for many children and young people, the earnings of their parents are more likely to determine where they get to in life than their own talent, that we've got to break. We absolutely got to break that.
OK. Sakir, thank you. Susan Chee. Sue, your question to Sakir.
Hi, Sue.
Good morning, Sakir. Nice to talk to you. Under this government, we seem to have one scandal after another, and the government appear to seem happy to sit back eating the popcorn while the devastation goes all around. And the latest scandal is the raw sewage being put in our water, which I believe is criminal negligence. And my fear is that the next big worry is typhoid, because water is a waterborne disease, and it's going to be the next thing that we get, especially with the hot weather.
So I'm just going to paraphrase, because so many people want to have their say. We're talking about water, the industry there. We know that it is drowning in debt, some £14 billion, the quality of the water, and indeed leaks that aren't being fixed. Sakir, is it time to look at nationalisation?
I don't think nationalisation, but this is a real problem, Nick. I mean, you know this, and Sue knows this, and across the country, I think there's a revulsion that rivers, our beaches, our seas are polluted.
Well, I think there's revulsion that shareholders have been paid and holes haven't been fixed.
Absolutely.
That's what revolts people.
Regulation needs to be tightened, it needs to be enforced, there needs to be accountability to the top. And I think
What do you mean by that?
That it should go right to the top of the organisation.
She could face criminal charges?
Should be in a position of personal liability, whether that's civil or criminal. But
so they could. The water boss, if she knowingly allows these, they could face criminal charges.
There needs to be something that goes right to the top to get this moving. I also think the government needs to have the courage to say we're going to have a look at some of these licences again. This cannot go on.
So they should be stripped of their licences?
Either removed or tightened. These licences should be taken down and looked at again. But we can't go on. I think Sue's description is right. The government is, as it doubles the it's sitting this one out, and it's disgusting. They need to do something about it.
Why not nationalisation or common ownership? I remind you, when you were running for Labour leadership, you used the expression common ownership for industries such as water, rail, energy. Is this one of your famous flip-flops, Sakir?
No, Nick. I'm not ideological about this. I'm pretty practical-minded, and that's why in other areas we have said we want a publicly owned company, GB Energy, which will run the energy of the future, I hope. But when it comes to water, I looked at the amount of money you'd now have to pay to bring water back into into public ownership is huge. And that would simply be used to pay off the shareholders. And I don't know what Sue would think about that if I said my policy. All those shareholders made a huge amount of money. Well, my policy is to use taxpayers' money to pay them off now. I actually think the better route is regulation, enforcing it, and taking these tougher measures that I've outlined.
Sue, thank you. Malcolm is in Kent. He was at your speech yesterday. He says the following: I enjoyed Sir Keir, and I listened to what he said, and I took a lot away from it. But surely the protesters are right. He has U-turned over the environment. Doesn't this track back to what your Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says, that the initial promise of £28 billion a year has been, sorry to use this expression, watered down? Sir Keir.
Malcolm, is Malcolm on the line?
No, sorry, it's a text.
It's a text, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Look, firstly, I made a massive speech on
has this £28 billion been taken off the table?
The 28 billion. We will work up to £28 billion by the middle of the incoming Labour government. So that'll be year 2 or year 3. So the commitment is still there. It's simply that we'll work up to it over 2 or 3 years rather than starting in that position.
But you had promised it initially.
Yeah, Nick.
Is this not another flip-flop?
No, there's just 2 things.
Go ahead.
Bear me out.
Yes, please.
When we made that commitment, inflation was running at nothing like the figure it is now. So the cost of that is much higher. Now, we have to reflect that and take difficult decisions. Secondly, the closer we've got working with the sector as to how we will use this money to invest in the future, it's clear that it will take time working with them to ramp that up in any event. So actually, this is not backing down, this is doubling down.
Thank you for that. Let's get Ahmed in New Malden. You're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Ahmed, go ahead. Your question, sir. Good morning.
Hi, Ahmed.
Good morning, Sir Keir. Yes, the cost of living hardship is bad enough. Since last year, Bank of England have raised the base interest rate by 13 times, and is predicted to go higher 7%, giving banks a blank check to raise the mortgage rate to whatever they like.
What is your question? Sorry, Ahmed, I've got to move you to your question because I've only got 2 minutes or so.
Sir Keir, do you have any confidence in the economic leadership of Governor of Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, and do you support him for his actions?
A lot of people have called into question whether the Governor of the Bank of England should have acted more speedily or indeed perhaps more robustly right at the start. Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, I believe in the independence of the Bank of England, and therefore I'm not going to criticise the decision of the Bank of the... Look, there was a reason why the last Labour government made the Bank of England independent. They were right to do it. But Ahmed's point about the interest rates is well made. I mean, mortgages are going through the roof. And they're going, as with everything else, it's hitting this country harder than other countries. And the root cause of that is 13 years of economic failure under this government and that kamikaze budget under Liz Truss last year that did so much more damage. And I think it's no surprise that people know that Tory mortgage bombshell, the responsibility for that lies at Downing Street.
OK. While we're on the subject of banks, Sir Keir, can I ask you, does a bank have the right to effectively close or suspend someone's account because they might not agree with their political or controversial views?
No, I don't think. I mean, within reason. I mean, there would be...
No, not terrorism.
I was just about to qualify that. Extreme views like terrorism, then yes, of course. But as a general proposition, no. I'm not sure there's very much evidence that that's actually happening. There's been a lot of discussion.
We have a vicar who appears to have had... Yeah, there does seem to be a vicar who was rather concerned about his building society promoting pride, and then we have a Scottish journalist. But it's not perhaps as widespread, or perhaps some of the recipients are not as colourful as they might have.
I mean, there was a lot of discussion a few days ago about this, but it turned out it may have been about financial thresholds rather than political views. But as a general proposition, no, of course I don't. But other than when it gets to the extreme edges.
Finally, we've just mentioned the Shadow Chancellor. A previous Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, has said your party is drunk on power and being led by a right-wing faction. Is that a description of you?
No, absolutely not. I've got a lot of respect for John, but he's wrong on this one. But that having been said, I'm not going to apologise for the fact that I am single-mindedly, absolutely laser-focused on taking the Labour Party from its worst ever election defeat in 2019, if we possibly can, into power so we can change the lives of millions of people.
You certainly run the party with an iron rod, don't you? What's happened to Nick Brown? He was suspended back in September. We haven't had an update on that. Also, I hope I get this right, Bambos Charalambos, who's been a month since he was suspended. Diane Abbott has also been suspended and she's apologised in public. I understand the North Tyne Mayor, Jamie O'Driscoll, won't be allowed to stand again for Labour. Dear me.
Well,
Is this Labour under Sir Keir? No other views are tolerated?
No, I mean, those are all different cases, Nick, with different issues.
There are more I could have quoted.
There are issues coming through, and they need to be dealt with under the proper processes. And of course, we want and are a broad
Nick Brown?
church.
He was chief whip.
Yeah, that's a complaint going through our independent process, so I can't comment on that. But Nick, the general proposition, of course we want a broad church, of course we want to and fro, we want a lot of argument in the party.
But you don't brook any dissent or argument, do you? Or you don't have these people back?
Oh, Nick, come on.
Diane Abbott, she's apologised.
We talk within the party the whole time. We have a big debate the whole time. We thrash it out, but we do have to come to a collective view. And I do think that one of the mistakes we've made in the last few years, last 5-10 years, is that we as a party thought that fighting amongst ourselves and arguing amongst ourselves is changing the world. It's not. I want my Labour Party to face the electorate and have a positive offer for the electorate. So if you like, I am deliberately turning the Labour Party inside out. I want us to stop looking inwards and arguing amongst ourselves and turn outwards and face the electorate, who are the ones that really matter.
Have you spoken with Ms Abbott?
No, I haven't.
OK. Lastly, is any footballer worth more than 100 million quid?
Declan Rice, who was 105 million. He's a fantastic player, and I'm really pleased we've got him. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
But he's a very, very good player, and he's exactly the player we need at Arsenal.
Why is he the right player for Arsenal?
Because he's that sort of strong, driving midfielder. Sort of,
more than £100 million. Isn't there a danger money is going to completely skew the sport here?
Well, I mean, that's a broader discussion about money coming into sport. And I think, take this with a pinch of salt because I'm an Arsenal fan, but City winning over and over, Man City winning over and over again because they've got so much money. In the end, you have to ask the question: is that healthy for the sport? And your team, won in 2016, Leicester.
Yes,
amazing victory. Only then to be relegated 7 years later. So there's something wrong with. The way the money is being used in football.
Will you settle for the Premiership, or does it have to be the double next season, Sir Keir?
Oh, look, I mean, I'd settle for the Premiership, but if we get the double, that'd be great. But we were so... I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think anybody who likes football would say that Arsenal squad this year, they're a fantastic team, and we can build on that.
All right. Thanks for coming by the studio. I'll probably let you get away and help teach your daughter or something like that if you've got her through another strike day. So, Sir Keir Starmer, thank you for appearing on LBC. Let's give you some headlines.
Sir Keir Starmer's told LBC he doesn't think there's an alternative to expanding ULEZ in London. The Labour leader had refused to say whether he backed the scheme's extension across the entire capital. Detectives are continuing to question a woman over the death of an 8-year-old in a car crash in southwest